So I know many of you watching this have been impacted by cancer in some way, right? But how can a cancer diagnosis be a reason to celebrate? So that's what we're going to talk about in today's episode. It's actually the second episode of the Nonprofit Activator podcast, where I will be amplifying the good work that nonprofits are doing all across the country. I am your host, Tiffany Allen, and I refer to myself as the Nonprofit Activator because I provide straightforward and impactful coaching and training for nonprofits, which activates them and launches them to success. So essentially, I help people help people. So, on this podcast, you're going to hear firsthand accounts from nonprofit founders who have overcome challenges, celebrated victories, and left indelible marks on the lives of people that they touch. Their experiences are going to inspire you, educate you, ignite your own passion for activating nonprofits. So, with that, I want to share my special guest, McKeel Shaw with Team Jenny Bean. And that is a childhood cancer nonprofit dedicated to support kids fighting the fight of their lives. So, I want to share a little bit about Mike before I bring him up. He is an award winning speaker. He is a veteran entrepreneur with over 25 years of experience in the creative space. And he draws from his own family story of survivorship and triumph. And he has developed growth strategies for businesses and nonprofits literally all across the country, leaving a lasting impact wherever he goes. So he's a former teacher and trainer, and he has a passion for helping organizations grow and reach their full potential. He has a bachelor's degree of science in organizational management and a master's of science in strategic marketing. So, in other words, he is the bomb and he did not come to play. Okay. He is not just a successful entrepreneur, but he is also a compassionate philanthropist. And in 2017, he founded the Team Jenny Bean Childhood Cancer Foundation with his youngest daughter, Jenny, and she is a pediatric cancer survivor. So Mike used Jenny's journey as the inspiration for Team Jenny Bean, and he turned tragedy into triumph. And now today, Team Jenny Bean is a nationally recognized brand, and Mike has been featured on the NBC Today Show, Insider Edition, and Daily Mail. He has extensive experience in entrepreneurship, marketing, and nonprofit work, and he is a highly sought after speaker for conferences and events. So, as you can see, I am extremely excited to hear him speak today about his experience, particularly starting his own nonprofit with his daughter. And with that, I'm going to bring Mike to the stage. Welcome, Mike, to the podcast. Thank you for coming.
Well, thank you for having me, Tiff. I'm so excited to be here. I've been waiting and anticipating being on your podcast, and I'm really excited to be the second guest. So thank you for the opportunity as well.
Yes, and this is not by chance. I knew I had to get Mike on here because he has a powerful story to share, but he just also has the experience of helping nonprofits with their marketing and tell their stories too. So he's just an awesome person to follow and just get to know. But today we're going to talk about Team Jenny Bean. So tell me a little bit about that. Tell me about you and what inspired you to start Team Jenny Bean.
So Team Jenny Bean is our nonprofit, but the irony of it is it wasn't by any means planned. So I know a lot of nonprofit founders that we talk to collectively, they had this big vision in a long time, this ideal to be a nonprofit, and it was just putting all the pieces together. Team Jenny Bean is a little different in that regard because, as Tiffany, one of my little phrases is having a pain that turned into a passion that grew into your purpose. And Team Jenny Bean is definitely an example of that. So for Team Jenny Bean, it's gone on 5 years now. So it was actually 5 years. It was 2017, and we are from upstate New York, Rochester, New York specifically. And I was actually in my graduate program, and I was doing homework, and a Friday night writing a paper. And as I'm writing the paper, my home office at the time was right next door to our downstairs bathroom. And I hear my wife say, babe, come here for a second. So I'm like, babe, I'm writing the paper. So I kind of got the tone of her voice that she wanted me to come now, that wifely tone. So long story short, I go in and she's giving my daughter a bath, and she shows me her abdomen, Jenny's abdomen. And she said, Jenny has these two small growths on her abdomen, and they look about the size of like half of a breakfast sausage. And I'm looking, I touch them, And I say, like, Jenny, does it hurt, or does it feel awkward or anything? She says, no,
Mhm.
Daddy, I don't feel nothing. And
Mm.
um, a little puzzled, but it seemed like maybe a reaction or something. I assume we're gonna get some salve or a prescription next Monday,
Mhm.
and we'll be fine. And my wife looks over to me and she says, I think we should take her to emergency. And I'm like, babe, it's Friday night. It's like 10 o'clock or maybe 8 o'clock on Friday night. Like, you don't
Mm.
want to go to emergency on Friday night. So for the second time, she gave me that look and she says, get your keys. We're taking her to emergency.
Mhm.
So as I've heard, happy wife, happy life. I got my
Good
keys.
advice.
Absolutely. And on to emergency we went. So we were in emergency, and after about 4 hours in emergency and a barrage of different tests, x-rays, ultrasound, blood work. I think we even had an MRI. Um, we're in an emergency room, and if anybody's ever been in emergency, it's not a place you want to be, but you be in a
Mhm.
little room that often is separated by that little hair thin curtain, and it's another family on the other side. So we're sitting there. I'm sitting in the armchair. Jenny and my wife were on my left side on the bed on the iPad. And as we're just sitting there, kind of, getting a little testy, right? Because we tired of being in emergency. And two
Mhm.
doctors walk in, and it's a male and a female. And the female doctor kind of steps up forward. And just as calm as I'm talking to you, she just looks at us and she's smiling. And she says, it looks like cancer.
Mm.
And I paused there because that's that moment. It almost felt like everything froze and went fast forward simultaneously. And I remember looking at my wife, and she looked back at me, and we both look over at Jenny, and Jenny's eyes are big as half dollars. And the only thing that triggered in my mind immediately was like, she get her out of the room. Like, they got to get out of the room immediately. So I held my hands up and I pushed
Mhm.
them. And when I get in the hallway, I'm like, excuse my language, what the hell were you thinking? Like, why would you say something so ridiculous? This child ain't got no
Right.
cancer.
Right.
You crazy. And long story short, oh, I'm so sorry, and we didn't mean any harm. And I just told you, I wanted to let you know up front what it looked like, what it looks
Mhm.
like to us. And I'm like, lady, like, really? So we were admitted into the hospital, and we had a formal biopsy done of Jenny's kidney. And I, for a while, was still like, y'all got this wrong. I think y'all got us confused. Hey, we don't smoke, we don't drink. I'm a
Mm.
vegetarian. This can't be. And
Yeah.
diagnosis came back formally that Jenny was diagnosed with stage 4 kidney cancer. And while we were in the hospital on one of our stays, we would sometimes, you kids can't sleep. You go to the kitchen, and you had a little kitchen on our floor for the
Mhm.
family. And as we're coming back from the kitchen one night, there's a nurse with a little boy. It's a little black boy and I mentioned because the nurse was white, and there's this little cute black kid about 2 years old at a high chair. And I
Mhm.
remember giving him chicken nuggets, and me and Jenny kind of looking like, like, okay. And Jenny says to me, she goes, Daddy, I didn't know the nurses could bring their kids to work with them. And honestly, I assume it wasn't her kid, but then I was like, mm. So when we
Mhm.
got back to our room, my wife explained to she and I that it wasn't the nurse's child, but more likely a kid that the nurse almost kind of like surrogate with and kind of took as her own because
Mhm.
of the time they spend around the children. And then unfortunately, during our stay there, we had saw multiple rooms across from us and adjacent to us
Mhm.
that there was no one but medical professionals going in those rooms. So my wife explained that some kids didn't have moms and or dads, and the
Mhm.
hospital staff was the only people that they really interacted with. And Jenny could not get over the ideal that a kid was going through tumors, as we call them, in the first couple of months, and they didn't have a mommy and daddy. And she
Mm.
would ask my wife and I over and over again, what can we do for those kids that don't have mommies and daddies, mom and dad? Like, what can we do for them? And
Mhm.
of course, our answer number one was, we'll pray for them. Like, we can pray for them, Jenny. And
Mhm.
that wasn't enough for
Wasn't good
Miss.
enough for her.
So one day, out of pure just I think just numbness, honestly, I
Mhm.
I wanted to appease her and make no burden, take any burden from her on top of
Mhm.
what we're dealing with. So I went to Toys R Us when we had a Toys R Us, and I filled a cart up, and I came back to the hospital and literally dragged these giant purple bags full of toys up to our room in our unit, and I presented to Jenny, and I said, Jenny, I think this is a place we could start for those kids who may not have moms and dads that are going through what you're going through. And she just gave me kind of that little quiet smile.
Mhm.
And that story is what begot Team Jenny Bean, and the story grew and grew as it got back to her school.
I just want to say just how amazing, and I've told you this before, Mike, but just I don't think it can be overstated how amazing it is that in the time of like immense sadness and her being scared and not knowing what's next, she decided to help somebody else. Like she decided to look beyond herself and her suffering to help someone else. And it's amazing that that thought just morphed into a whole organization. So tell me how that has morphed to today. Like, what does Team Jenny Bean look like today from that first trip to Toys R Us to now?
So what that created, that whole, and honestly, it was like I said, it was organic. It wasn't because of good strategy or being smart or clever. It was just kids like toys, right? At the end of the day. So what that has evolved to is we've learned through our own experience and through seeing countless children go through this battle, is that many times pediatric cancer can be extremely isolating for kids.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
you would imagine it's a lot. It's a lot for an adult to deal with. But for kids specifically, pediatric cancer really isolates them because many times they're immunocompromised. So the
Mhm.
chemotherapy and some of the treatments suppresses the immune system. So they can't be around a lot of people. And ironically, after going through this pandemic of the last 3 years or so,
Mhm.
masks became normal. But if you remember, there was a time where the only young kids you saw with masks were the little kids with no hair that once
Mhm.
in a blue moon you would see out at the store or out and about. And the reason which is because they have to protect themselves because their immunity is low. So
Mhm.
that reality means that a lot of times when kids have pediatric cancers, and there's so many from leukemia. Jenny had Wilms tumor, and it was stage 4.
Mhm.
Um, so they can't be around a lot of people. They have to be very cautious about where they're at. And so many kids in this space, they're in the hospital for months or years, not just a month here or a week there or a month here like we went, but they're
Mhm.
in the hospital literally for years. And for Team Jenny Bean, this has resulted in us trying to bring some normalcy to the kids that are going through this, trying to
Yeah.
give them comforts of home, but also giving a little positive distraction. Because
Yeah.
imagine being in a hospital all day long, you're thinking about getting shots or blood draws, or you got to go and get this procedure. These are procedures that adults go through, let alone adults don't like them. Kids definitely don't like them. So
Yeah.
we do care kits, and we send care kits home. And care kits evolved from being a bag with toys and novelties to being now where we have our care kit boxes. And in those boxes, we put toys, comic books, coloring books, crayons. We put games. And even we've evolved even more at this stage at year 5 for us, that we custom shop for kids. So if a kid tells us they want these specific items, we try to shop to fill their box
Love
with things
that.
that we like. Absolutely. To
Mhm.
customize. So we've evolved a lot over the time, but the core is still the same. We want to allow kids to be kids while they fight the fight of their lives. And as simple as it may seem, that little box that now we don't just take to hospitals, we send them directly home.
Mhm.
Kids get joyous when they see a box come with their name in the mail, or when a delivery comes and a knock comes and it's for little Jason or Malik or Tina. It really lights them up, and that's the foundation of everything we do. So we've grown from there and we've expanded some. So now we're trying to also bring kids, serve kids with sickle cell, because that's a huge space, especially for African American
Yeah.
children, predominantly um, the people who suffer from this. But we also provide financial support. Unfortunately, we provide some of the financial support for families who have lost their kids and for their memorial or
Mhm.
their funeral service. So we've grown and we've reached different areas based on the needs that we've encountered.
I love that. I also want to talk about just, and to be completely transparent, how in the cancer space, the face of the cancer like nonprofit space or cancer research doesn't always look like a little black girl, which is why it's so powerful that you all created Team Jenny Bean. And if you have a chance to go to the website, you can see actually Jenny's likeness of when she was a little girl, and there's actually a plush doll and all of that. Like, that's what makes, there she is. If you're watching live, you can see the plushie on the screen. But it's so important to see her face and to show the different sides of cancer. But not only that, you as a father, right? You as a father dealing with your baby suffering with a cancer diagnosis, stage 4, no less. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about why it's important for you as a nonprofit founder, a Black man who is a nonprofit founder, to be in the cancer space.
So a lot of people would say, what does ethnicity or what does a person's color have to do with this? We all suffer. All kids, all colors, all ethnicities, all races and religions suffer from cancer the same. And there is a lot of truth to that. But unfortunately, at this date and time, there's still a lot of health inequities. There is a
Mm,
whole lot of disparities in the healthcare system. And that isn't left out of the cancer space, unfortunately.
yeah.
So, as a man of color, as a Black man specifically, I didn't have a lot of resources to go to that I knew of anyway when this diagnosis came. And one of the things that I talk when I speak and I talk to different groups around the country is that one of our key roles as fathers, and Father's Day just happens to be this weekend, is to
Mhm.
provide, prepare, and protect. I call them the 3 Ps. And it is some of the foundational kind of identity as fathers. And this, with Jenny's diagnosis of stage 4 Wilms tumor, which is a kidney cancer, I couldn't buy it or pay for it away.
Yeah.
I couldn't beat it up. And there was no way to prepare for it because there are no prerequisites or there are no foreshadowing. It just happens for many people some days. And it was for me, many times I felt really debilitated. I felt paralyzed. I felt, in some cases, even hopeless
Mm,
because what kind of dad am I? And my baby girl, nonetheless, the baby of the family, I can't do anything to fix it. So what I could do was lean on my faith. And for me, my faith really became the foundation of being able to cope through this. And as a father, and I take nothing away from moms because moms are critical mass, but as a
mhm.
father, you're not assumed to collapse. You're not assumed
Yeah.
to be expected to be emotional and to be lost within this space, right? We're supposed to be stoic and we're supposed to hold it in and we're supposed to be
Mhm.
the stronghold for the family. And many times I felt as though some of the emotions I was feeling, I had to suppress. And
Yeah.
I remember one particular time, this was very early, this was before Jenny had gone through her surgery to remove the tumors. It was summer, and I remember summer because I was cooking her lunch one day, and the tumors grew really, really fast. So she
Mm,
had one of the little fitted kids, and Jenny was 6 when when the diagnosis first happened. So she had one of those little fitted girl T-shirts on, and I'm
mhm.
cooking her lunch one day, summertime, and as I looked down at her, the tumor had doubled in size. It was protruding through
Wow.
her T-shirt. You could
Mm,
literally see almost like a little fist protruding through her T-shirt and her abdomen. And I remember in the moment, it like broke, like I broke inside. Like it literally paralyzed me. And I forgot how I did it, but I had to run in the basement. I had to
mhm.
literally run in the basement for a second and cry. And that's not the average story you're gonna hear probably from dads, but I could do nothing else. I had to get away from her, not to see me break, but it broke me just to see how aggressive this tumor was growing in her. And again, I couldn't do anything about it physically. I could just be present. Um, and as a man in this space, I think there needs to be more resources to allow us to be in our feelings if you want sometimes, and be able to have space, especially as a man of color, because there were support groups that I came in contact with. I never went to one, so matter
Mhm.
of fact, but anyone that I did encounter or know of, there wasn't a representation of a culture,
Wow.
and there are some nuances that are important culturally in this space.
Yeah, completely agree. I wanna That's an interesting segue to talk about just you as the founder, because that's you as dad and having to deal with all the things that I couldn't even imagine that you were going through and your family was going through. But then in the midst of all of this, you and your daughter became nonprofit founders, and you are now continuing that legacy.
Mhm.
And I want to talk about from the perspective of a new and a small nonprofit founder, because you do have an interesting story how you got where you are and the fame and the I'm talking to somebody famous, y'all. The fame and the publicity and the press of it all. But I want you to talk a little bit about what is it like being a new and small nonprofit founder and how you got there. Because I think people need to hear that part of your story about how what you guys did with sharing the toys with the kids turned into the nonprofit organization it is now. Like how did that happen?
So you heard me talk about the story of bringing the toys to the hospital. So the part I didn't mention was, so once I gave Jen these bags, she's about business. I mean, she don't want to wait. Okay, Daddy, let's take them to the nurses. Or who do we give them to so the kids could get them? Can we go give them to the kids? And
Mm,
of course, you can't in the hospital. So we dragged those bags to a nurse's station on her unit, and I explained to the nurses, and Jenny was there, of why we had these giant. I mean, the bags of toys were bigger than Jenny, literally bigger than Jenny, and we explained what her mission was. Her vision was that she wanted to give them to kids who may not have support systems or have their families around. And I remember the moment because the nurse that we first mentioned, I forget her name, I'm sorry if I forget her name, but she
mhm,
starts to bawl, like just starts to turn red, and she's crying, and she's like, "Oh my God!" Like, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, I know it's kind of sweet, and I appreciate it," but I didn't get. And her point was, this little girl is going through cancer herself, and stage 4 nonetheless. And instead of worried about her own pains or her own issues that are coming for, she's concerned about other kids. And I think that's something I may have not thought of up front.
mhm,
It was the moment, and it was a good distraction. So as this story got around, and I think her principal and her teacher, she went to a Catholic school, and her principal and teacher came to visit on one day, and we had shared the story. So nuns are really proactive from my experience. So they
mhm,
took the story back to school, and they're always finding, how can we help? What do you guys need? And they told the story. So that story just was kind of coincidental in my mind. They wanted to do a fundraiser because they wanted to help Jenny's mission and raise money for Jenny's mission. I'm like, what mission? Like, Jenny just wanted to help some kids at the hospital she's at. So as they did the fundraiser, I'm coming to the school on the day they did a lemonade fundraiser where they sold cups of lemonade for a quarter. And as I came and my wife came, we came to bring our quarter to get some lemonade support. And the PR person, the marketing person from the school at the time, says, "Mr. Shaw, I was wondering, would you be willing to talk to this news reporter that wanted to cover this story?" And I'm like, "News reporter? Like, what
mhm,
news reporter?" And she's like, "Well, I hope you don't mind. We shared Jenny's mission with." So two different reporters came. So I'm explaining to them, and as we did that, that's where things kind of they kind of morphed, and they grew into something that was way beyond what we were assuming, and it was never a plan in the first place. So from the news, checks started coming to the school. They didn't know a way to contact us, so we started getting checks, and they were $10 and $100 and $500 checks started coming to school because of the story about this little girl who was going through cancer, who wanted to help other kids go through cancer. So
mhm,
through that, we met so many different people in the community that would say, like, what can we do to help? What can we do to help? And the biggest segue, very frankly, was one of my best friends, or mutual friend of ours now, is Gerald. And Gerald said to me, he's like, "Yo, you got to do a GoFundMe." And I'm like, "GoFundMe for what?" He's like, "Listen," I'm like, "I'm not begging nobody for no money." And you know Gerald's personality. He's like, "Nah, dummy, you ain't begging nobody for no money." He says, I'm sure, like myself, speaking for him, there are many people who want to help you and they want to support you and they don't know what to
Right.
do.
That's right.
And this GoFundMe may coalesce the community to be able to pour into this mission, to be able to give something to support your family in this mission, in this regard, Jenny's mission. So I was like, nah, G, I'm not begging nobody for no money. And he kept telling me, like, yo, it's not about you. One of my favorite phrases now, it's not about
Mhm.
you.
Mhm.
So I did the GoFundMe, and I think we raised about, honestly, maybe $2,000, $3,000, and that was just friends and families in the community. And then I got an email from GoFundMe, and it was like, "Hey, we see Jenny's story, and we've been paying attention to Genesis the last couple months, and we want to feature her. We want her to be one of our kid heroes. So on this Giving Tuesday, which was November, we want to send her a special gift, and we want to kick off and really amp up her fundraiser because she's doing for other kids." So they
Mm.
sent you this giant $1,000 check, and they started really putting some resources with us. So I mean, I had a team of a couple people at GoFundMe in California who were reaching out to me every week. And Mike, how's everything going? And how's Jenny doing? And I'm like,
Wow.
cool, right? And I just mentioned that because I'm sure you get it.
Yeah.
GoFundMe was reaching out to me, which
Right.
was hindsight like, wow, that was really dope. So I'll leave it there and let you continue.
Mhm.
But it was really, really a big deal.
I'm glad you brought that point up, Mike, especially from the perspective of people who are starting their nonprofits because they just want to do something good. And a lot of times people just land there because they have something going on in their life. There's a lived experience that kind of propels them into this nonprofit space, but that doesn't necessarily mean you know how to navigate it well. And one thing I want to pull out that you said, Mike, was you felt like you were begging. And I encounter that a lot with new nonprofit founders. Like they feel like asking for money for a cause to help someone else is still on their behalf. And they feel like people are going to look at me weird or funny at the fact that I'm asking for money. And let's just be real, in the Black community, we don't always do that. That's just not a norm always for us, unless it's like tied to church or a school fundraiser or something like that. But when you branch out of that, that's really uncomfortable. And Mike and I met because he reached out to me to help with his nonprofit. He was asking about grants. And I just want to share, like, what are one of the mind shifts that you had to make to stand up in your nonprofit foundership, that I activated in you? What's something that you were able to learn from being a founder?
So Tiffany, I'm more than really humble, but really excited to share this for anyone who doesn't know, who has not come across you or understand some of what you do for nonprofits. You met with me, and it's a couple things I take from it. So the activations, if you will, that I
Mhm.
got working with Tiffany, and this is not a commercial, but it's reality. And if it looks that way, it's because it's true. Is Tiffany told me very early on, and I remember something she said specifically. You said that sometimes you need to call your donors and reach directly out to them and tell them thank you and ask them why they donated. And I got to be transparent. At the time I was like, Tiff, I'm not calling out on people. to and at the time I was like, I'm gonna call them. I gotta call all those people. And I haven't still never called everyone, but I
Mhm.
did start to call people directly. And the other thing you taught me, to what you just spoke about, is this ideal of begging. All right. It's never begging to advocate for the people in
Right.
the causes that you support. And
That's
I
right.
think that is such a misnomer that we're begging. We're not taking this money to get the brakes fixed. We're not taking
Right.
this money to get a new pair of sneakers. This money, these resources, are for many times people who are the least acknowledged and have the least resources in our world, in our communities. So I've learned a phrase that I've said, and I just mentioned from Gerald. From that concept, it's not all about me. I stand in the gap for people who may not have a voice, who may not have the platform to ask for themselves. So when I do solicit and ask and speak out for the people I serve, I understand it's an honor and a privilege. And
Yes.
then the other thing, and I just want to throw this out there, you told me not to assume what's in people's pockets.
Yes.
Don't go assuming what people got, right? And don't assume you can look at nobody and tell whether they're going to give or not. Um, and at the end of the day, what I found over and over and over, and I can't stress this strong enough, is that for some people, if not most people, it's an honor to give to causes that they believe in.
Yes. And thank you, Mike. Mike just gave you a master class on giving, just like that, right? But I
Thank you.
do, just to circle back to, sharing about the Black community in particular, because Mike and I have those conversations a lot about how philanthropy and giving looks differently in the Black community. It's not less, because a lot of people assume that, but it just looks differently. And we always give, we always, rally around each other. We're big
Always
on
have.
community, right? But it's not necessarily through a nonprofit that we've always done that. So we're a very giving culture, but it hasn't always looked the way it's looking now, and it's evolving now, where now more people of color are founding their nonprofits. And it's just, like I said, that mindset shift is necessary so people can see that it's not you begging it, right? You're advocating on someone else who doesn't have the voice or doesn't have the platform that you have. So, especially coming from a Black founder who's new and small, what do you think, Mike, funders and donors get wrong about that experience?
I think that sometimes in this space, in the nonprofit space in general, well, first let me acknowledge one thing, and we throw this around and joke about it a lot. One of our old team members actually coined the phrase, but a 501c3 is not a business plan.
Mhm.
And getting that 501c3 for so many of us, we think it's a magic wand and that money starts falling out of the sky and grants just become immediately available because I got my 501c3. Look at me. And that
Mhm.
is the biggest misnomer. The 501c3 is a tax designation. It actually gives you permission to collect money on behalf for a charity. But the thing that I think a lot of people don't get about this work is that for us, it's not just a thing or a hobby or something we do as a part-time mission. Very much becomes lifeblood for us. It
Yes,
becomes an assignment for us.
yes,
And it doesn't mean that other bigger organizations don't see it that way, but we're boots on the ground and we're far more nimble and we're able to move and change and make decisions more directly than some of our bigger, far more stratified uh, um, brethren, if you will. And I
mhm,
think that they really need to understand that you're going to get more results from smaller nonprofits because they're boots on the ground in the communities they serve. They're not just in the communities, many times they're of the communities. And
mhm.
if people don't take chances, it's not just financial either. Sometimes we need stewardship, sometimes we need mentorship, and
Yes,
sometimes we need awareness because we want to do the work. And this is the key thing, we're going to do the work, frankly, whether we get a grant or not. The work is still going to get done, and that you're not necessarily always going to get from some of the more, as I said, stratified larger organizations.
I love that. The work is gonna get done because it's personal, right? And it's a
Absolutely.
deep connection in a lot of these communities where people work. Thank you so much, Mike, for saying that because I do think that a lot of folks don't understand that. Um, and even to that point, I would love to hear a story about how Team Jenny Bean helped somebody. I know you have a lot of amazing stories just because of the nature of the work that you do, but can you share, like, just the story of how Team Jenny Bean changed somebody's life?
Um, Yep. So I mean, I'm trying to think of is so many different like which one to pull down. So one that comes to mind was a lady who found us. She donated to our GoFundMe, and our GoFundMe, we've been blessed enough to raise over 250,000 collaboratively over the 5 years from our GoFundMe campaign. And the reason I mentioned, and I know crowdfunding is not the norm for everyone in this space,
Mhm,
but I think it's amazing for us because it also has given us amazing exposure. All right,
mhm,
we reach people from Japan to the United Kingdom, across all 50 states. And this one lady reached out to me and she messaged me and she said that she used to have to travel 8 hours every Friday to and from to get her chemotherapy. And she said she regretted it and she was begrudging about going sometimes, but she had to go to sustain her life. And she said that after seeing Jenny's story and seeing some video footage, and this is the importance of visual storytelling and the storytelling part of what we do, um, that she saw the joy, but
Mhm.
also the tenacity of this little 7-year-old girl skipping down the hall to go
Mhm.
get her radiation. And she said, as she flies to radiation this Friday, that it gave her a different perspective, that she was able to go and get that treatment even 8 hours away. And she said that impacted her. And she said, for the rest of her treatment, she's going to have to smile because she gets that everyone doesn't have a choice. There's some people who don't, they're nowhere, there's no treatment to get.
Mhm.
Um, and then the other story, just to give the short version, was a kid that we served, that got one of our care kits. His grandmother had reached out to me, and we had went shopping, and Jenny went shopping and bought all the things on his list for his care kit. And when we went to send it, we didn't have the right size boxes in stock. We ran out of our shipping boxes, and we had to wait a couple of days. I think it was like 7 or 10 days for the boxes to come in. And
Mhm.
we shipped it, and he was a Spider-Man fan. A little boy, I think 5 years old. He loved Spider-Man. And I texted his grandmother to let her know. And we had been communicating back and forth for a couple of weeks. And I texted her to give her the shipping tracking number. And she didn't respond immediately. And that wasn't normal for our communication. And a
Mhm.
couple of days later, she called, and the family and I were out and we were shopping a Sunday morning. And she says, Mike, our little guy is gone. My baby is gone. And I was like, gone. It didn't even click to me. Um, Little man passed away before he received his box.
Mhm.
And she told us that she received the box a couple of days after the call. And she just told me how she broke when she opened the box up and saw the little um, specialties and novelties that he loved. And what they ended up doing was actually the Spider-Man that Jenny bought for him. They end up putting in his casket
Mhm.
and burying him with this toy. And I think maybe not life changing in the immediate sense, but it matters, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And little tokens, as you may think, it's a toy, right? But that toy can represent peace of mind. It can represent the innocence of a child. And I
Mhm.
think those stories that come to mind immediately.
And with that, y'all, I hope you had your tissues nearby because, I've heard that story a few times, but every time I hear it, I just imagine I see the picture of the Spider-Man and I see the family gathering around, praying over the young soul and him having it. And it just touches my heart every time I hear it. But I want to move us into a segment I'd like to call activation mode. And you just heard Mike explain the amazing ways he touches people all across the world. And we want to give you an opportunity to be activated to support Team Jenny Bean to continue to do that work. And it's just those small tokens of people feeling seen, people feeling like they matter, young kids still being able to be kids, even though they're fighting cancer. That matters. So we want to give you all the opportunity to support Team Jenny Bean. And Mike, if you want to share, what is something that the organization needs right now that people can support you with?
So, as you would assume, probably cash donations are always the most tremendous because we can do the most different options, whether it's buy supplies or buy toys. As you heard me say, one of the things we do is we also do financial support for some of the families we serve. That shows up in ways of paying for transportation, buying gift cards for families, Uber cards. But it also shows up as for some of the families. Unfortunately, this young man you heard me speak of, we donated for his funeral services, and we're able to support the family because so many people don't have insurance on kids. And that may sound off putting, but who thinks that they have to get an insurance policy on a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 2-year-old? So sometimes, because this is out of the blue in many cases, we have to support for those services, and people are not in a place to really think about where they're going to get $6,000 or $7,000 from. So we
Mhm.
provide those as well. So donating directly to the organization is probably the fastest, the most efficient way. But then we also always use donations of new toys can be
Mhm.
sent to us, and I can give information for where those could be shipped to. And it's a variety of toys. Because there's so many different kids we serve in so many different areas, we focus on one to 18. But
Mhm,
in fact, I promise you, we got a toy closet in our home. It's not a
mhm.
closet, it's a room, with toys and supplies that we've collected over the months and over the years, so that when we need something, it's on deck. So that's in a tremendous way. Um, it's just those are probably the key ways, but there's so many different ways, and you can engage by visiting www.teamjennybean.org or .com, and we always keep that updated as well.
All right, y'all heard it here. You have now been activated. It is your opportunity to move now. If you are watching this on the screen, you will see a donate page that you can go to, and I will also include the donate page in the show notes. Thank you all for just showing up and supporting young kids fighting cancer. And as we almost wrap up this episode, I just want to ask you, Mike, and I know people probably ask you this a lot, but how is Jenny doing now?
And that's probably the second most asked question, and I actually take it for granted because of how normal life is for us, in a positive way. Jenny is now 12 years old. She'll be 13 in about 2 months. She hasn't been on a medicine or a prescription in 5 years. She is grown, and as crazy as this may sound, even Jenny had some massive surgeries. She had her left kidney removed and a lobe of her liver removed. She had about
Mm,
8 surgeries over the course of her treatment. And even as simple as this may seem, symbolically, even the scars have healed. Jenny has a scar that's
wow.
probably a foot long across her chest and abdomen, and even that is healed in ways that you really couldn't know unless you got close to look. And I just say that to say she is truly the reflection and the picture of hope. And with that being said, I sincerely get that there's so many families and so many children who don't
Mhm,
have the results that our family had. But that's why we appreciate, and we know this is a part of our mission and our purpose, to support other families who have this unwelcome monster of cancer to intrude in on their lives. And we have to stand in the gap, because this work won't wait. We have to continue to fight for kids until a day comes where cancer is truly something of history. And
mhm.
that's what we stand for at Team Jenny B.
Love it, love it, love it, love it. So glad to hear that she's doing well. So glad to hear that even the scars are healing, and such a such symbolism that she is healed, and that she can use this experience just to continue blessing other people, even through the nonprofit and even through her own life. So I'm just so glad to hear she's doing well. And as we come to a close, do you have pieces of advice that you would offer to a nonprofit founder? What would you say?
Um, First, and Tiffany, I didn't talk about it a whole lot today, but
Mhm,
always be transparent. And if it's something that you personally are aligned with, or if it's not something that's personally that happened to you, always be willing and able to not sell, but share your story. Be very concise and be very transparent with your story. Your story is so powerful in the work that we do as nonprofit founders. It's like your fingerprint. Someone could have one very similar, but nobody has a story just like yours. And the better you are at being able to share that story and articulate it in a way that activates, excuse the pun, but
mhm,
activates your donors, your community to really align with you. Um, Activation many times will make people become allies, advocates, and even evangelists for the work you're doing. And your
mhm.
story is a trigger to do that. And even though it's not comfortable sometimes, we really have to understand the power of sharing our story and how it really aligns people with our missions to accomplish them.
Love that. Mike is going to always talk about storytelling because he is a marketing professional, but he's just an amazing storyteller, just period, anyway. So I love that advice. And as we close, I love music, I love to sing. So I just want to ask you this question. If your nonprofit was a song, what would it be?
And you've heard it too many times probably. I love Jill Scott Golden because it is just a song about optimism and finding the silver lining. And our slogan, celebrate every victory. And when I think about living my life and living our lives like they're golden, it doesn't matter what it looks like, feels like, sounds like. you still got to find a reason to have gratitude and to celebrate. So I would use Jill Scott's Golden as our song.
All right, y'all. Y'all heard it here. Thank you so much, Mike. Make sure you visit Team Jenny Bean, their website, and the donate link to support them in helping kids fight the fight of their lives. Thank you all for watching this episode, and we will see you in the next one.
Thank you, Tiff. I appreciate it.